Introduction to the Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra, the key to opening the treasure house of Yogācāra. 1. Introduction. Why is it called Explaining the Profound and Secret? Among the vast ocean of Mahayana Buddhist scriptures, one sutra stands out for its profound philosophical discourse and systematic theoretical construction. The Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra, the Sutra of Explaining the Profound and Secret Truths. Revered as the fundamental text of the Yogācāra, mind-only, school, it is an indispensable key for exploring the deeper principles of Buddhism. The three characters of its Chinese title, Jia Shenmi Jing, are deeply significant. The original Sanskrit name, Saṃdhinirmocana, contains three layers of meaning. First, the continuity of two things, referring to the unbroken stream of afflicted thoughts. Second, connected like joints, illustrating how afflictions bind sentient beings as firmly as bones are joined together. And third, profound and secret, pointing to the deep and hidden meanings of the Dharma. Master Xuanzang, adopting the meaning, profound and secret, translated it as Jia Shenmi Jing, the Sutra of Explaining the Profound and Secret, indicating that this sutra explains those extremely profound and subtle meanings realized within the Buddha's own enlightenment, helping sentient beings liberate themselves from the deep entanglements of affliction. The great Tang-dynasty Yogācāra master Kuiji aptly called this sutra a treatise among sutras. This assessment is remarkably precise, because the organizational structure, the method of discourse, and even the themes explored in the Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra are very close to the form of a treatise, sastra. It is no longer merely a simple narration of the Buddha's Jataka tales or a recitation of vows and incantations. Instead, it involves systematic discrimination, analysis, and explanation of the Dharma, possessing a distinct character of philosophical debate and reasoning. 2. Translations and versions. The Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra had 4 successive translations in China, among which Master Xuanzang's Tang-dynasty version is the most complete and widely circulated. In the 21st year of the Chang'an era, 647 CE, Master Xuanzang translated the Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra in 5 volumes and 8 chapters at Hongfu Temple in Chang'an. The text is clear in meaning and rigorous in structure, and later students of the sutra have all taken this version as the standard. Before this, there were 3 other translations, by Gwabhadra, Lu Song Dynasty, Bodhirusi, Northern Wei Dynasty, and Paramartha, Chen Dynasty. However, these were either partial translations or alternative renderings, and they fall short of Xuanzang's version in completeness. 3. Structure of the whole sutra, the perfect framework of object, practice, and result. The Saṃdhinirmocana Sutra consists of 5 volumes and 8 chapters, organized strictly and with clear logic. Chapter 1 Introduction narrates the circumstances that gave rise to the Buddha's teaching, describing the 18 kinds of perfections of the Pure Land's adornments and the 21 qualities of the Buddha's body. The main teaching in 7 chapters. The remaining 7 chapters constitute the main teaching, which can be understood in 3 parts: object, practice, and result. 2-5. Expounds the theoretical basis on which practice relies, including core doctrines such as the characteristics of ultimate truth, the nature of mind and consciousness, the characteristics of all phenomena, and the nature of being without self-nature. Profundity of practice, chapters 6-7. Expounds the methods and stages of practice, namely yogic calming and insight, samatha vipassana, and the 10 bodhisattva grounds, bhumis. Revealing the profundity of the result, chapter 8. Expounds the meritorious qualities of the result of Buddhahood achieved through practice, i.e., the Tathagata's activities of the 3 bodies, trikaya. This structural arrangement embodies the complete progressive sequence of Buddhist study and practice. From understanding the theory, the object, to engaging in practical cultivation, the practice, and finally realizing the fruition, the result. It is highly systematic. 4. Core content, an outline of the 8 chapters. Chapter 1, Introduction, the adornments of the Pure Land. The sutra describes the Buddha dwelling in a great palace, of the most excellent radiant light, adorned with the 7 precious materials. Endowed with 18 kinds of perfection, including perfection of color, shape, measure, location, and so on. This pure land is not the impure land seen by ordinary beings, but rather the enjoyment land for others, Sabhagakya, that can be perceived by bodhisattvas on the grounds. It embodies the Yogācāra view of the pure land, which holds that the 3 realms are only mind, and all phenomena are only consciousness. The purity and adornment of the Buddha land are based on seeds of the uncontaminated, anusrava, as their cause, and have the Tathagata's pure consciousness as their substance. Among the assembly, the foremost are 10 great bodhisattvas, including Saṃdhinirmocana, Suvidyat Bodhisattva, Dharmadgata, Suvisadhamati, Prabhavua, Kusalamula, Paramarthasamuthana, Avalokiteshvara, Maitreya, and Manjusri. Chapter 2, the characteristics of ultimate truth, 4 aspects of reality. This chapter contains the most philosophically profound part of the entire sutra. Through 4 progressive discussions, it reveals the nature and characteristics of ultimate truth, Paramartha Satya, ultimate reality. First section. The Saṃdhinirmocana Bodhisattva answers the questions of Suvidyat Bodhisattva, clarifying that ultimate truth is inexpressible and non-dual. Although all phenomena have the distinctions of conditioned, saskta, and unconditioned, asaskta. These are only the verbal teachings skillfully established by the Buddha, not ultimate truth itself. If sentient beings cling to concepts and words, giving rise to distinctions of right and wrong, they are unable to realize ultimate truth. As the sutra states, within this, the conditioned is neither conditioned nor unconditioned, the unconditioned is also neither unconditioned nor conditioned. Second section. The Buddha teaches the Dharmadgata Bodhisattva that ultimate truth transcends the sphere of all conceptual examination. Conceptual examination, vitarka vikara, can only operate in the realm that has characteristics, is expressible in words, and can be designated. However, ultimate truth is the sphere personally realized internally by the Noble Ones, Aryas, free from characteristics, inexpressible, beyond all designation, and beyond all disputation. Third section. The Buddha analyzes for the Suvisadhamati Bodhisattva the relationship between ultimate truth and all conditioned phenomena, the phenomenal world, as being neither the same nor different. If they were the same, then ordinary beings who see conditioned phenomena should also see ultimate truth and have it be afflicted. If they were different, then realizing ultimate truth could not lead to the cessation of conditioned characteristics. In reality, ultimate truth is pure while conditioned phenomena are afflicted, hence they are not the same. Ultimate truth is the universal characteristic, samanyalaka, of all conditioned phenomena, e.g., impermanence, no self, hence they are not different. Fourth section. The Buddha teaches the Subhuti Bodhisattva that ultimate truth has the characteristic of being universally pervasive, a single flavor everywhere. Just as space pervades all places without distinction, ultimate truth is present in all dharmas. The 5 aggregates, skandhas, the 12 sense spheres, ayatanas, the 18 elements, datas, dependent origination, praditya samutpada. The 4 noble truths, Arya Satyani, and the 37 factors of enlightenment, Bodhip Dharma. As the equally unified Dharma nature of suchness, Tathata. Chapter 3, the nature of mind, consciousness, and mentation, the proposition of the 8 consciousnesses. This chapter is a crucial source for Yogācāra doctrine. The Bodhisattva broad wisdom inquires about the secret skillful means of mind, consciousness, and mentation, citta, mano, vijnana. Here, the Buddha for the first time proposes the concept of the consciousness which is the seed of all things, sarvabjaka siddham. This is what later Yogācāra would call the eighth consciousness, the alaya-vijnana, storehouse consciousness. The consciousness which is the seed of all things. Because it contains the seeds, bijas, of all dharmas, it continuously flows and takes rebirth in the six destinies, gatas. And it appropriates and sustains the physical body, the sense faculties. The appropriating consciousness, adana-vijnana, because it follows along, appropriates, and sustains the physical body, preventing it from decaying. The storehouse consciousness, alaya-vijnana, because it is connected and stored together with the physical body, sharing its security and danger. The mind, citta, because it accumulates and grows the seeds of all dharmas such as forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and tangible objects. The sutra uses the metaphor of a torrent, boga. The appropriating consciousness is extremely profound and subtle. All seeds flow like a torrent. I do not teach this to the foolish, fearing they will mistakenly cling to it as a self. This vividly illustrates the characteristic of the eighth consciousness as a continuous, unbroken stream of momentary arising and ceasing. Interestingly, this chapter only mentions the eighth consciousness and the first six consciousnesses. It does not yet explicitly establish the seventh, the afflicted mind, klayamanas. However, the sutra states that whenever the first five consciousnesses, of sense, arise, a discriminating mental consciousness, manovijnana, must operate in conjunction with them. This left theoretical space for later Yogācāra to establish the seventh consciousness. Chapter 4, The Characteristics of All Phenomena, the Doctrine of the Three Natures. This chapter is taught in response to the questions of the Bodhisattva virtue root. The Buddha proclaims the three kinds of intrinsic characteristics, svalaka, known as the three natures, trisvabhava, which form one of the core theories of Yogācāra. 1. The nature of complete conceptualization, parikalpitasvabhava. This refers to sentient beings who, due to ignorance, avidya, falsely discriminate regarding things that arise dependently on causes and conditions, paratantra. Clinging to the existence of an independent, real, self, atman, and phenomena, dharma. This is like mistakenly perceiving a rope as a snake. It is entirely a subjective superimposition. The sutra uses the metaphor of a person with an eye disease seeing hairs, flies, etc., illustrating that this is an illusion caused by the affliction of ignorance. 2. The nature of dependence on others, paratantrasvabhava. This means that all dharmas arise depending on causes and conditions, as in the 12 links of dependent origination. When this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises. This is the illusory nature of conditioned arising, praditya samutpada. Although it exists conventionally as a process, it is not ultimately real. The sutra uses the metaphor of the various appearances seen by the person with the eye disease. 3. The nature of perfect reality, paranapanasvabhava. This refers to the suchness, tathata, that is equally present in all dharmas. It is the ultimate reality of all dharmas, revealed after removing the conceptualized nature, parikalpita, from the dependently originated nature, paratantra. The sutra uses the metaphor of the sphere perceived by a person with healthy eyes. A bodhisattva who can truly and accurately understand these three natures, understanding that the conceptualized nature is a characteristic-less dharma. The dependent nature is afflicted and characterized by impurity. And the perfect nature is pure and characterized by purity, can abandon defilement and realize purity. Such a person is called a bodhisattva skilled in the characteristics of all dharmas. Chapter 5, The Nature of Being Without Self-Nature, the Threefold Lack of Self-Nature and the Three Turnings Teaching. This chapter arises from questions posed by the Bodhisattva ultimate truth production. He addresses the apparent contradiction where the Buddha sometimes speaks of existence, e.g., the aggregates, elements, and sense spheres as real factors, and sometimes speaks of emptiness, e.g., all dharmas are without self-nature, requesting the Buddha to explain his profound intention, abhipraya. The Buddha reconciles this using the concept of the threefold lack of self-nature, trivita nisvabhat. Based on the three intrinsic characteristics, the three natures, he establishes three kinds of absence of self-nature. 1. Absence of self-nature in terms of characteristic, laka nisvabhat. This is established based on the conceptualized nature, parikalpita. Because the conceptualized nature is merely designated by conventional names and concepts, it has no real, self-existent characteristic of its own. It is like an empty flower, a hallucination. 2. Absence of self-nature in terms of origination, utpatti nisvabhat. This is established based on the nature of dependence on others, paratantra. Because dharmas arising from causes and conditions exist depending on other forces, they are not spontaneously or independently existent. They are like illusions, maya. 3. Absence of self-nature in the ultimate sense, paramartha nisvabhat. This is established based on the nature of perfect reality, parinibbana. Perfect reality is the suchness revealed by the no-self of dharmas, dharmanairatmya, and the no-self of persons, pugilanairatmya. The twofold absence of self. It is called the absence of self-nature in the ultimate sense, and it is like space, akasa, which is unconditioned and without inherent characteristics of its own. Thus, it can be understood that when the Buddha says, all dharmas are without self-nature, sarvadharma nisvab, he is speaking with this hidden intention based on these three absences of self-nature. What is absent is the self-nature of a self and phenomena that ordinary beings conceptually cling to. It is not a denial of dependent origination and causality. This chapter also contains two other important topics. First, the doctrine of the five spiritual lineages, Yogācāra. Although, from a theoretical standpoint, the three vehicles, Sravakayana, Pratyekabodhayana, Bodhisattvayana, all attain liberation through understanding the three absences of self-nature. And the Buddha's implicit intention is to speak of only the one vehicle, Ekayana. Nevertheless, in terms of the spiritual capacities of sentient beings, there exist five distinct lineages. The Sravaka lineage, the Pratyabhuddhita lineage, the Tathagata, Bodhisattva lineage, the indeterminate lineage, Yogācāra, and the lineage of those without any spiritual potential, Agotra or Ekantika. Second, the classification of the Buddha's teachings into three turnings of the Dharma wheel, Tri-Dharmacakra-Pravartanani. The Bodhisattva ultimate truth production classifies the Buddha's entire teaching career into three periods. The first turning, taught for those of the Sravaka vehicle, focusing on the Four Noble Truths, as found in the Agamas. This is a teaching of existence, but it is implicit and not ultimately definitive, Niyartha. The second turning, taught for those of the Mahayana, focusing on emptiness, Sunyata, as in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Although it reveals the Mahayana, it is still implicit, surpassed, and conditioned, not truly definitive. The third turning, taught for those intent on all vehicles, expounding the teachings of the three natures and the three absences of self-nature. As in this very Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra. This teaching comprehensively includes everything, is explicitly and clearly revealed, and is the unsurpassed, unconditioned, truly definitive teaching, Nitartha. This is one of the earliest records within Mahayana Sutras of a systematic classification and interpretation of the Buddha's teachings. Chapter 6, The Practice of Yoga, Calming and Insight in Yogācāra. This chapter is taught in response to the questions of the Bodhisattva Loving One, Maitreya. The Buddha explains the Mahayana yogic practice of calming, samatha, and insight, vipassana, in great detail, covering 26 aspects. The core idea is this. The objects, alamabana, that a practitioner observes, whether it is ultimate truth, paramartha, or the characteristics of all dharmas, dharmalaka, are in fact all manifestations of consciousness alone. The principle is, that which is cognized by consciousness is only consciousness itself that appears, vijñāptimatrāta. This is the contemplative method of all phenomena are only consciousness, sarvadharma vijñāptimatrāta. The sutra here, for the first time, explicitly proposes the term consciousness only, vijñāptimatra. Through the practice of calming and insight, one realizes that all external objects are merely projections of one's own mind. This allows one to abandon attachments and realize reality. This chapter elaborates in detail on the progressive stages of practicing calming and insight, the types of observed objects, the nature of the observing wisdom, and the stages of realization. For example, the sutra states that a practitioner should first develop a firm intellectual conviction regarding the manifestation of all dharmas as only consciousness, and then progressively engage in contemplative practice that accords with this understanding, until they directly realize it face to face. This path of practice, moving from conceptual understanding to direct meditative experience, laid the theoretical foundation for the practical methods of the Yogācāra school. Chapter 7, The Grounds and Perfections, the 10 Bodhisattva Grounds. This chapter is taught in response to the questions of the Bodhisattva Lord of Contemplation, Avalokiteshvara. The Buddha explains in detail the progressive stages of a bodhisattva's practice from the first ground, bhumi, up to the state of Buddhahood, along with the perfections, paramitha, cultivated on each ground. There are 38 sets of questions and answers, covering the names of the 10 grounds: joyful ground, pramudita; stainless ground, vimla; illuminating ground, prabhakari; radiant ground, arsamad; hard to conquer ground, sudarjaya; manifest ground, abhimukhi; far-going ground, dragam; immovable ground, akala; good intelligence ground, sadamati; and dharma cloud ground, dharmamega. The 10 perfections, dasapramitha: generosity, dana; morality, sila; patience, tai; effort, virya; meditative concentration, dhyana; wisdom, prajna; skillful means, upaya; vows, pradna; power, bala; and knowledge, jnana. The first 6 perfections are primarily cultivated on the first 6 grounds, while the last 4 perfections are emphasized on the subsequent 4 grounds, abandoning the 10 obstructions and realizing the 10 suchnesses. On each ground, the bodhisattva abandons specific obstructions, vara, and realizes a particular aspect of suchness, tathata. For example, on the first ground, one abandons the obstruction of the nature of being an ordinary person, tagjanadvara, and realizes the suchness that is universally pervasive, anyagata tathata. On the second ground, one abandons the obstruction of faulty conduct, dukkharittvara, and realizes the most excellent suchness, varatathata. Finally, on the 10th ground, one abandons the obstruction of not having attained mastery over all dharmas, sarvadharma vivek-praktvara, and realizes the suchness that is the basis for mastery of karma, karmavasadadhigama tathata. The sutra also particularly emphasizes that in the practice of the 10 grounds, a bodhisattva must not only benefit themselves, svartha, but also, and even more importantly, benefit others, parartha. Each ground has its corresponding activities for the welfare of sentient beings. This principle of practice, which unites compassion, karu, and wisdom, prajna, embodies the fundamental spirit of the Mahayana Dharma. Chapter 8, The Accomplished Activities of the Tathagata, the Qualities of Buddhahood. This chapter is taught in response to the questions of the Bodhisattva Gentle Splendor, Manjusri. The Buddha reveals the meritorious qualities of the Tathagata's three bodies, Trikaya, and his activities for the benefit of sentient beings. The content includes distinction of the three bodies, the distinctions of the Dharma body, Dharmakaya, the emanation body, Nirmocana, and the distinctions of the Buddha's speech, Vgvya. The Dharma body is the fundamental reality principle, the emanation body is the responsive manifestation, and the speech is the turning of the Dharma wheel. The Tathagata's mind and sphere, the Tathagata's mind is ultimately pure, and the Tathagata's sphere, Yogācāra, is inconceivable, Asintya. The character of turning the Dharma wheel. The Tathagata's teaching is non-regressing, non-perishing, inexhaustible, and without fault, adapting to the capacities of sentient beings. The true nature of nirva, although the Tathagata appears to enter nirva, parinirva, in reality, he is not extinguished or gone anywhere. The difference between the Dharma body and the liberated body. The liberated body, Vimuktikaya, attained by the two vehicles, Sravakas and Pratyabuddhitas, is merely liberation from the afflictive obstructions, Klevara. However, the Tathagata's Dharma body is endowed with immeasurable qualities and powers, and there is an essential difference between the two. Pure lands and impure lands, according to the minds of sentient beings, what they perceive differs. This chapter perfectly concludes the entire sutra, revealing the state of Buddhahood as the final achievement of practice and bestowing great confidence and aspiration upon the practitioner. 5. Conclusion. Why read the Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra? The Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra holds an extremely important position in the history of Buddhist thought. It is the most fundamental scripture of the Yogācāra school, providing the theoretical source for important treatises such as the Yogācāra Sastra, the Mahanasagraha, and the Cheng Weishir Luan Vijnaptimatratasadi Sastra. Many core Yogācāra theories, such as the 8 consciousnesses, the 3 natures and 3 absences of self-nature, Yogācāra contemplation, the 5 distinct lineages, and the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel, all originate from this sutra. For modern readers, studying the Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra has at least 3 significant benefits. First, acquiring a systematic framework for understanding the Dharma. The sutra constructs a complete and rigorous system of Buddhist doctrine from the 3 perspectives of object, theory, practice, and result. This helps us understand the deep structure of Buddhist thought. Such a systematic way of thinking is extremely enlightening for modern people trying to comprehend complex issues. Second, learning the analytical methods of Buddhist philosophy. The sutra's analysis of truth, ultimate truth, mind and consciousness, the 8 consciousnesses, and existence, the 3 natures, demonstrates a very high level of philosophical discernment. It teaches us how to penetrate layer by layer into the essence of things, without being misled by superficial appearances and conceptual labels. This is immensely helpful for training the mind. Third, providing theoretical guidance for meditative practice. The detailed explanation of calming and insight, Samatha-vipassana, in the chapter on the practice of yoga, is an important source for understanding Mahayana meditation. It tells us that practice is not a matter of blind faith, but a practical discipline based on a profound understanding of how the mind and consciousness operate. The great Master Taishu once praised, the Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra is like a wooden clapper, announcing the Dharma throughout the world. Xuanzang's translation uniquely surpasses all other masters. For those who study the characteristics of dharmas, dharmalaka, where else can they turn? This sutra is not only essential reading for Yogācāra scholars, but also a vital text that should be studied by all practitioners who wish to deepen their understanding of the Dharma. In our current era, filled with information overload and restless minds, The wisdom of all phenomena are only consciousness, taught in the Saṃdhinirmocana Sūtra, can perhaps help us see clearly that the myriad disturbances of the external world actually originate from the discriminating attachments within our own minds. If we can observe our own minds truthfully and accurately, and transform consciousness into wisdom, Sutraa.Path, we can find true peace and freedom amidst the complexity and diversity of all phenomena.